can turn the chat on.
So glad you guys know about this stuff.
We're live.
What's up, guys? Friends and fam, Iron Disciple Clan. Nice to see you, boys.
Did you plan that in advance?
No, I spit this stuff,
okay,
man. I grew up in the ghetto. It just comes out, baby. You know, indoctrination. Yeah. So Joe, bring us up.
So Andrew Tate has a beard now. He went to prison for 90 days.
He has a beard.
There was cockroaches in his cell, and now he's Islamic.
And he is a cockroach, too. He said he was a cockroach.
Because he doesn't die.
Yeah, that's
Cockroaches are pretty indefatigable.
And I think that a lot of the hair from his head got transferred to his beard.
He was bald before.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that beard probably stole a couple strands. Yeah, this is pretty thick.
That's raw, dog.
Yeah.
That's kind of brutal.
So then he may have grown more hair in prison.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Joe.
So I like to, as you guys can see, there's some whiskey here. This is some Wild Turkey barrel proof rare, and barrel proof's 112. And we got a shout out to
Pints of Aquinas.
Thank you for allowing us to get this done, because this is fun for us tonight. It's going to be a great discussion. We're super excited.
We're like sponsored by these people. Is this something I didn't know about?
We made friends with a turkey in the woods. You know, he gave us a couple pecks, and now we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Pints of Aquinas, though, guys. You should check out his podcast channel.
Really good,
it's
dude.
Wonderful.
He gave you the idea to drink some whiskey.
He did. Especially for these kind of podcasts where it's a little more free-flowing, you know?
Yeah.
It's got to be nice.
Well, I'm drinking my Monster, so cheers.
Yeah,
cheers.
I don't know what's...
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, let's do that. Cheers. Cheers, audience. If you have something, drink it with us.
Oh, yeah. Before we get going, I see Invincible Extreme Muscle Cars comment. Glenn couldn't make it. We were talking with Glenn. He was going to join us on this, and he was moving, and his internet wasn't set up right away. So
he's in Nevada.
Yeah,
he's internetless in Nevada.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But so we'll grab him next time.
Yeah, we miss you, Glenn, and we're sorry for the people who were expecting to hear Glenn. You know, we wish he was here too. It's last minute, so.
Yeah, it was last minute idea for us. So
yeah,
put some sunglasses on and try to be Glenn.
Yeah, could get that deep husky voice. Ugh, masculine.
Yeah.
Well, so Andrew Tate gets out of prison. He's been there for 90 days or something like that, right?
Yep.
Yes, he has. And that's the Romanian max time. So they kept him there for 90 days because
I think it was more than that.
Was it?
Well,
six months?
Yeah, it was 90 days.
No, it was 3 months.
It was 3 months in prison. Now
but
he's still on house arrest technically.
Right.
It's a 6 month total.
Right.
Before they have to come with charges.
Okay. So he's busted out, and then the Valuetainment guy, Pat, what's his last name? Patrick Bet David. He got on the in with him and got this. What was it? 5 hours or 4 hour interview?
They're gonna be releasing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So Mike's idea was to break it open and have us watch it, and we did. And we're gonna comment on some points that we saw come up that were interesting to us. And there's a lot in there, man. I mean, it was
a great conversation, because it's like you look at, he gave BBC the chance, and I don't know if you guys saw that, but he recorded it secretly.
Yep.
And man, they just came in with this giant agenda. Didn't even care to ask him about stuff he just went through at prison.
They were deceitful, from what I understand.
And so he just was like, here's the full video of what they did, and they look like clowns now. So Patrick going in there, just having an honest conversation, letting them talk, was very refreshing.
Yeah, because I know everyone's been wanting to hear what is Tate's, instead of it being like a battle, just letting him to speak his mind, ask him the questions, see what's up. It's not a battle. And with the BBC, it obviously became a battle. They had approached him a bunch of times in prison, and it's on the interview, and he was like, no, on repeat, I'm not gonna, no. And they had said, okay, well, we just want to do this. And when they ended up interviewing him,
list of questions,
it was an assault.
Yeah.
It was like a full frontal assault, and he was like, whoa, but you know how Tate is. He's like, I destroyed them.
Destruction.
I completely annihilated them. And I'm actually kind of afraid that I beat them, because now, they're going to come at me even harder because the egos got hurt. You know, that lady got taken into the room by her superiors and got hurt.
Yep.
He's
Shit
like,
chopped. I might get killed. I heard that come up a bunch of times.
You can tell he's a little paranoid.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
He has that, and he says he's not paranoid, but you can tell he's paranoid. He's not sleeping. You know what I mean? He keeps waking up at 5.
Well, he said his brother And, like, he's the worrier. His brother's just the calm voice.
Yeah.
That's how it was in prison. That's how it was at home still.
Yeah, they keep each other balanced, apparently. Yeah. But, like, Tate also, of course, he's like, my brother's the most amazing person in the world. He keeps me. But I could do that, too. But I don't do that because I do this.
Megalomaniac,
both,
dude.
You know, balance each other. I make sure to, like, level the playing field.
Oh, God, dude. That's constant.
He's like, and I can veto everything he says. By the way, like, we love each other, but I'm the big brother, and I pull the vetoes.
I'm like, I feel bad for Tristan.
Did that.
I'm like,
I always got to veto my brother. Like,
but
I
you
just
don't
got to
live
claim
together.
the front seat. That was always the veto
really?
I had. I would just look at him like, dude, I'm the older one. Get out.
What about Jordan Peterson's rats, man? Like, you got the big rat has to let the little rat win sometimes. Otherwise, the big rat and the little rat don't hang out.
That's we're
you know,
killing
like,
the little rat, dude.
You gotta give the little rat a chance.
We weren't playing a game there.
That's just an
Life
is a game.
Life is a game.
It's all just what.
So did you have like a little moment
of
of glee as you saw the dissatisfaction on your brother's face, or did you even look back for it?
No, eventually just became a respect thing. Like, older brother gets front seat of the car.
Yeah.
And that's a seniority thing.
Yeah,
that's just normal seniority.
It's like I give seniority to my mom on that when she was riding with her, whatever.
Yeah, and that's something you don't see anymore. And I think that's a good point to bring up. A lot of what Tate brings to the table is like traditional male values, and this is something that we talk about all the time. It's like this is known to us because John and I take this. We were raised like a lot of the similarities like between Tate. Like when I hear him talk, it's like. John and I have always lived together.
You two have a very similar
relationship. We work together. We rely on each other our whole lives. Our dad raised us very similar to what Tate said. His dad said is like, well, except our dad was Italian. He's like, you leave him, I'll kill you.
That was the way it was.
Deal with that. I don't care.
You're like a 3-year-old kid. His eyes, he has like these drooping, sagging eye bags, and they're like so bloodshot. And he used to be one of those guys who'd be like really nice, and then switch gears, and it was like a different person. And so we're having a nice time, and then Dad struck like a lightning bolt, like it's time for a lesson. These kids are getting a lesson. So all of a sudden we went from playtime to I'll kill you, son. Yep. And I remember being like, I guess it works. Like in retrospect, I think back to it. I'm like, if you want to leave a mark on your kids, you got to kind of scare the living shit out of them.
Traumatize them.
And so each time he taught the lesson, it was like a little bit of trauma and a little bit of goodness. And the trauma mixed together with the goodness, and it like it just seared into your conscience. And so we would remember that. Yeah, we remember that. It stuck with us.
We stayed close our whole lives, and we worked together. And I totally agree with him. He's like, there's so much benefit. Like even you and David living together, you become so much more productive when you have like a male sort of like around you that you work with. It's like this competitive energy that's bred, and it's very healthy. And you look at like tribes, and like even we grew up, and like our idea was like, let's have kids at the same time.
Yeah.
So that we can go out on trips
We wanted
together.
to date twins. It was like that.
Like the tribal thing.
Yeah.
Like we're going to create a tribe. They're all going to be like, we're going to build this like, this bloodline, and like they will be.
Yeah, it was never a house. It was a compound.
Yeah. Well, you're doing exactly what.
No, I thought that was our dream when we were kids.
My point
in
saying this is like, this is something that was very natural for us. And I see a guy like Tate coming out and saying this, and it's very novel. It's like a mind-blowing experience.
Especially in the West. It's pretty common elsewhere.
Dude, it is, man. You got 3-4 generations. I mean, maybe 4. But yeah, 3 generations. You go to Italy, you got grandmas. Yeah. You go to Colombia, you got grandmas, uncles, different people. Yep. And it's cool when they all live in the same place. Like my wife, some of the old culture came with them from the old country to New York, and they all bought houses on the same road, in the same place. And the kids could jump from house to house, go get some lunch at the aunt's house, go play games with their cousin. And like, can you imagine what that does? I mean, the reason why Andrew Tate was bringing this into sort of like, because I guess towards the end of the interview, he was like, this is the core issue is that we don't have family values. And how do you insulate your family from all of the pressures from society? How do you safeguard your family from these outside societal pressures? He's like, well, you got to have a clan. You got to have as much downloading into your kid from your side as they're downloading into your kid from the outside. You need to have that kid be indoctrinated by you. And it's if you're just 2 parents, like that's not as good as, imagine having a whole aunt and uncle on the whole road. Yeah. You're going to get disciplined from your uncle, which is different from your aunt, which is different from your grandma. And you're going to start to learn about these social, sort of contracts between your family members. You're going to come out like way more evolved than a kid who just lives with his parents and goes to school and has those sort of superficial relationships. You're going to actually have sort of more grown-up.
Yeah,
cousins, brothers, sisters.
And you have that accountability that runs through. It's like not just your brother.
Yeah, not to mention all the fun games you play. You play Manhunt. You'll never have a better game than with your bros and your. It's the best. You know, snowball fights, all that. If you have snow, yeah. But I think that like Joe was saying was a novel thing to hear because in the
for
US,
the kids nowadays, because like I see just how like even like we were talking earlier on, like I was listening to that red pill thing that you were telling me about, and we were on the road, and it's just simple stuff like about dating, like and Rolos with these guys, and like talking to these younger guys, stuff that I would just never think twice about was like, know where you're gonna go. Be prepared to pull your credit card out.
Yeah.
Like, have a plan before you get a girl on a date. Like, how about that?
Yeah, those little things build confidence.
This type of stuff, I was like, whoa, I do not know my audience at all. Like, these kids, I don't understand the world that they're living in.
They didn't have examples, a lot of them today.
Dude. That's right. And that's why they want dad. That's why Tate is dad.
Yeah.
Tate is the dad that they never had.
But in reality, he's more like the vagabond reprobate uncle is really what he's kind of like. He's kind of like that kind of guy. Yeah. He sachets in, sachets out, but he's not really going to sit with you and play chess. But, you know, to your point, Joe, the disconnect with our audience, like that we have been learning as the Iron Disciples so we can properly serve and minister to these guys, has been a task. And, you know, trying to remove yourself of your own ideas of normal and try and adopt and understand what other people don't know, it's like that's where the work lies for us. And that's what the work for discipleship and mentorship lies for anybody who's out there to do what Thomas Aquinas says, what is love is to desire the good of the other. So, you know, I think that's been my struggle when you brought that up. And so, like, because I would never watch an Andrew Tate interview. Ordinarily, unless I was told to, I wouldn't. But it's so helpful.
Well, why
because
wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Because you don't need to get hyped up on those virtues and morals because you already have that structure. So for you, it's just like you already had our dad. We already had these experiences growing up. So to hear it again, it's kind of like.
But so many kids
with that type of emphatic, you know,
energy.
It's sort of like, well, bro, I'm already reading books right now. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson. I'm like getting deeper into what I should be getting into as a grown man. That this stuff is like, it's just excitement, it's entertaining, and it's good. It's good to hear that. What Tate's saying a lot is fantastic. A lot of people need to hear this. They need to get it drilled in their head. They need to get excited about being a good man and having virtues and starting a family and, like, you know, putting yourself into submission, having discipline, and get excited about fighting those battles every single day. Like, because it's not normally exciting, so you have to be like your own cheerleader.
You do, like, man. Yeah, bro, and I think Andrew Tate is like the king of hyping himself up. Like he actually knows how to hype himself up. I'm pretty impressed just by that. Yeah, you know, it's like most people need that from an outside source, but he can just fucking go wazoo by himself.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Anyway, let's get on schedule here.
Yeah, Dave, you want to start that? We're gonna jump kind of a ways into it at first because we kind of wanted to go over his
how you doing, Shutai?
I kind of have it titled like his evolution of his beliefs. So he kind of goes from his atheist background into Christianity and then into Islam. And I think that'll leave enough discussion there.
Oh, it's gonna be a nice, dense mama.
So
jamma.
Go ahead and hit us up.
Evolution of your faith. Yeah. Pre-2022, former atheist, couple of the things you've said in the past, God isn't real because you can't prove it. Yep. Okay, kind of like that was more the Malcolm X argument, right? Yep. Bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people far too often for God to exist. Yep. I'm the center of my universe. That's pre-2020. Yep. Then gradually you start talking about Christianity and, you know, in 2020 made a video announcing that you were wrong about what you had said previously about God, right? Yep. Now you start saying people are who are atheists are angry, bad energy people, and I don't want to be on that team anymore. And even if God is not real, the world is a better place if people do believe in God. I know God is real because there's so much evil in the world that there has to be an equal and opposite force. The devil can't exist if God does not. And if you look at the world today, it is very obvious that the devil does not exist. And I'll go to the last one here with Muslim. Quotes from you. Christians don't have a religion anymore because they tolerate everything and stand for nothing. Yeah. And by the way, I actually agree with you, the fact that they're tolerating way too much. Islam is the last religion on the planet. God is something to be feared, respected, and to prove yourself to, which means you got to earn his right. Yeah. It's hey, I want to earn your right and your respect, right? How did you go, if you don't mind talking about your own evolution? Because us as men, if you knew me at 25 years old, you probably would have liked that party with me. I was a selfish guy. I was a guy you would have thought I was, right? And we go through this phase of where the selfishness kind of comes down a little bit. You be selfish because you need to be driven, but to the point where you're like, listen, man, I got to really do something. And then somehow, some way, God enters. What's been your evolution of your faith, and where are you at today?
Yeah, I think Newton's, I think it's third law, equal and opposite force, what you just said there is absolutely true. There has been equal and opposite force to all the evil in the world. And that the equal and opposite force to all that evil has to be God. And I've talked about this at length even with atheists, and I try and say that regardless of whether you're an atheist or not, you're thinking of God as a man in the sky, but you need to think of God as a concept as a whole. And once you do that, it's impossible to accept that he doesn't exist, right? I said to the atheists, I said, let's say there was 2 islands. You're shipwrecked, right? And there's 2 islands. Both of them are full of savages. On one island, you and your friend are shipwrecked. On one island, your friend goes and he crashes and they kill him and they eat him. And you go to another island and they want to kill you and eat you, but they don't because it's against their religion. Mm-hmm. Did God save your life? Who cares? Who doesn't even know the name of their God? But their God said, don't kill shipwrecked survivors. And now you're alive. So their God saved your life. The concept of God in and of itself saved your life. You owe God just for the concept of it, the idea of it. So even the idea of opposing evil as a whole is a belief in God. So you're either an evil person or you believe in God in some regard. And then once I understood that there had to be an equal and opposite force, I was raised Christian. I live in a Christian nation. Romania is actually, I think, the 2nd or 3rd most Christian country on earth. It's a very Christian country here. It's churches everywhere. They strongly believe. And that's where I began my journey, but I always had a very healthy respect for Islam because I understand that to a degree, to have a religion at all, you have to have an intolerance, to a degree. Because you don't have rules, you don't have laws, you don't have any, like you said, you have to earn God's respect. If you're a religion which is tolerant of everything, then you don't have to earn God's respect. You can be a bad person and do bad things. God loves me, so it's fine. Well, no, it's not.
Sorry, guys, our internet is slow.
Or whatever is causing that lagginess. But,
got some ghosts in the wires, man.
It is interesting to see his evolution of his beliefs, because you can kind of see that, I think, in his rhetoric. Because when he was an atheist, 10 years ago, that's when that's what all the stuff they're clipping to really make him look like a crazy person. And then over time.
So what you're saying is atheists are crazy. Got it.
It's funny you're trying to. Yeah. Anyway. But the one thing he points out, which I guess he's not really wrong about, in the sense that Christians in the West kind of tolerate things that Islam would absolutely not tolerate. And what I think what he's not considering, and it's not just him that are saying these things, it's Muslims themselves in those countries, is my theory is like democracy plus wealth is going to inevitably equal feminist ideas, which degenerate into many different avenues. And so because we have a democracy and we have separation of church and state, the result is what we have. And I think if the Middle Eastern countries that are Islamic had that same governmental setup where they had democracy and more of a separation of the religion from their...
And wealth.
Yeah, and then combine it with wealth, because... Feminism is really, to quote Robert Henderson in his luxury belief idea, it's a luxury belief.
Yeah.
There's no feminism 500 years ago when you're just trying to survive.
Right.
So I think it'll be a matter of time with these Middle Eastern countries before they kind of end up in the same spot. They're just insulated because of their government structure right now.
And I think it's when we talk about evolution of a society or a people, it's like, there's always these tipping points where they can devolve rapidly. And you see that with the Roman Empire, you see that with Greece. And there's always this, and this is something that I heard on Uber Boyo's podcast, which kind of opened me up to a new frame of thinking. was that because of the volatility of the tipping point and the hysteria and everybody being so scared of change and being taken over by sort of more austere governments like China, or Russia, people tend to start to desire deeply the fundamentals, like the orthodox. They want to go back to the past where things used to work, right? So I'm listening to this podcast. That's kind of where I was at. I was like, there's rules that don't need to change. There's these binary ethics that we should stick to, right? They're not up for debate. They should be constants within our government and our daily lives. And this is what's going to yield progress in a harmonious society. But at the same time, we're supposed to sort of transcend by virtue of progress instead of going back. Because if we go back by that same rule, we'll just end up where we were before. You're just kind of protracting that moment. It's kind of like, Groundhog Day, but more protracted. You have to plow forward and progress. You can't go all the way back and be like, things were better in the 60s. You can't erase stuff like that. That's a fantasy. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to get away from that fantasy. And I feel like the Tates and people, they use that as sort of a ploy to motivate people. And I used to be one of those people who's motivated by the Orthodox and stuff like that. But it's not that you step away from the Orthodox, but you have to be able to transcend what's going on at this point in time. Now, he was very critical of the Christian faith. And I believe he just straw-manned the living crap out of it. That's what I saw him do.
Well, you hear him talk about his exposure to it. He sees clips on Twitter, probably like from a woke preacher. I know there's like a Twitter account that covers all the woke preachers' sermons and stuff. So if your exposure to the current Christian culture is Twitter, like, yeah, you're going to have a pretty skewed view of what's going on.
Yeah, and you can see American as a nation, and he kept on, addressing us as a Christian nation, which we are fundamentally. Our founding fathers were deists with a strong Christian background, and they separated church from state for a reason. But he sees it as the Christianity. You can see he sees it as being a weak religion.
Yeah,
and he says that Islam is the last true religion, and he thinks that religion is what keeps the fundamental and tradition alive within the world. So it must have boundaries, it must have rules, and it must have these guidelines that make it rigid against certain progressive impacts that come along with moving forward. Mm-hmm. So like Jordan Peterson likes to say this a lot. He's like, he uses as the analogy of the baby in the bathwater, right? Mm-hmm. So every time you move forward, you have to dump out that bathwater, but you keep the baby, right? And you have to make this progression, it's like separating the wheat from the chaff in every generation. So we move forward, we got all this garbage that's accumulated, we got to get it out, and we got to separate that and distill and keep what's good from all that experience, right? Mm-hmm. So Tate sees the Christian church, which is very understandable. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, I would see and agree with him that you have, like, with even just looking down the road, at some of the churches in our area, you can see on their billboards in front of the church.
One across the street from us right now.
Say what they got. What do they got?
It's like, they got the gay pride parade flag. They got
it's a shit show.
All of the slogans on their front sign that cycle through.
Yep.
Right. There's no hard lines. There's no rules. And it comes down to, like, they're not reading their Bibles, essentially.
Exactly.
It's the same thing we bring up with the red pill community. It's like I don't know how many of the people that watch, a Fresh and Fit have read the Rational Male.
Exactly.
Right.
Source material.
That's the source material. I don't know if Tate has read the Koran.
I don't think he has.
I know he did the Ramadan,
which
is good. I mean, hey, do the Ramadan. There's a couple things I'd like to address. I am no specialist on Islam. However, our little sister, is a Muslim.
Can I say one thing?
Go.
Okay, before you get it, because I know you got a big thing there to say and get out, and I want to hear it. But on the topic, because this is what came to mind for me, is like whenever I try to judge something that spanned generations, something like a religion, like Christianity, right? What I feel like he's discounting and the way that he's strawmanning Christianity in the West is more than egregious. It's like a horrible abuse to Christianity, because here's what he's discounting. The world's superpower is the United States. The amount of technological progress, the freedoms, the liberties that this nation stands for that have unfortunately been perverted now within the last 2 or 3 generations. You can't take the entire legacy of the United States and its Christian mechanisms that gave this country its forward motion, that its momentum. You can't discount what brought it to its glory, the glory of the whole world, the gifts that it gave to the whole world, and that was Christianity. And so you say, well, Christianity is in a weak phase right now, because if you really want to analyze Christianity, what it's given to the world, it gave us science. Right? It gave us, from science went to technology, from the printing press, people reading, right? So he wants to say Christianity is a weak religion, then he needs to be specific and say it's weak now. Okay? It has not been weak throughout the generations. It's been one of the strongest progressive forces in the world for good that have liberated people out of poverty, out of ignorance, out of slavery. So, like, let's be honest here. And this is what you have to balance it against. The Muslim nations, they don't have any tech. They're living in the Stone Age in a third world country, and when you go to their countries, you'll know it. Because I'm not anything against the Muslims who live here.
Bringing up Dubai.
I was gonna say he'll bring up Dubai on that.
And that is a small
and I cannot stand that. I cannot stand
in the last
that.
like 2 decades.
Yeah,
full of Western people.
Full of West. Thank you, Mike. I mean, let's be honest with evaluating Dubai. I mean, that's what it is. It's like a surrogate Western, sort of bastion in this Muslim woke. It's like Muslim woke culture. I'll just say it. And Andrew Tate is like the progressive Muslim representing it. It's kind of weird.
That doesn't
but
really
the point,
know Muslim.
Yeah, that's why he's progressive, right? That's how you can be progressive in Christianity is you don't know it. So you have no way of you're ignorant, right? So the point I'm making is if you really want to think about the offerings that each religion has made to the world, let's be honest with Christianity. It has given so much. It's in a weak place right now. But the Muslim culture, if you're honest with the actual society and the cultures that they make, go there. Go to some of these places. You'll see their growth has been stifled by the rigidity within their religion.
Right.
They haven't had that progressive growth. You know, they're kind of like stuck in a lot of ways because of that.
Yeah.
I guess I'll let you go on your what you're going to talk about.
Shu Tai. Tate, he doesn't read. Huge disservice to himself. I agree 100%. I did not know that because he seems fairly well read. I mean,
I think he admits he doesn't just sit and read a bunch of books.
No, I'm going to be honest. I know he doesn't read for one reason, because when I listen to scholars and academics, and we try to do this right now, we always cite references.
Yeah, he does.
So like when Jordan Peterson said, or Mike Jones, or somebody else, because I'm trying to get the listener to know that the source material isn't coming from me. I am not the god of this information zone. I did not create this authentically for myself. All I'm doing is regurgitating, here's the source material. So people who read, that is in a habit of when they're expressing information. So I kind of could sense that early on. You know, he's always saying I and my perception and this and that. So, yeah, it's a good point. You should read your books, guys.
Source material. Speaking of source material, the Koran. I read it. Our sister is a Muslim, and I decided it was incumbent upon myself to read the literature behind her belief so that I could better understand my sister, whom I love deeply, and who has resigned herself to a belief system that is powerful. And I recognize it, and I wanted to understand her. I wanted to understand what she believed, and I wanted to know why. So what I thought would be the best idea would get the translation, because this is written in a different language. It's very much like our translations today, guys. Translations are important. I researched translations. I found one by Attenberry, which is supposedly the best one in English, and I bought the book and I read it. And it's a great book. I'm just going to start off by saying it's a great book. Now, I'm not exactly sure on the timelines, but from what I remember, around 800 years after the New Testament was assembled, this book was written. The Koran was written, right? So it doesn't predate Christianity. It shares a lot of the same stories. And I was very interested in that, because how do they tell these stories? What makes these stories, the virgin birth, Joseph going to Egypt, right? What makes these stories different? All right? What makes them different? So After I was done reading the Koran, I wrote something, and I'd like to share it with you guys. And
Yes,
this is what I understood to be different from our religion, and what makes these religions different. And there were some pretty big concepts there, and I'd like to share them with you guys.
And so the concept that I just want to underline and underscore for you before you start reading is that the Quran's story of some of you're talking about the difference between their version of some biblical stories as they retell them in their own way, and then the biblical right. Okay.
800 years later, yeah. What did this illiterate goat herder want to impart to his people? All right. So this is a note that I wrote in my notes. After I read a book, I'll often summarize it to myself and find out what I liked about it, because I read a few books, and it's hard to remember these things. So I just finished the Quran last week. It is a very special book, very different than the Bible. The Quran focuses on drilling into its reader that God is all-powerful, with our actions defining our path to heaven or hell. It repeats this in many beautiful ways, taking on the human condition of forgetfulness and willful disobedience. Important to note, they believe in the same God as the Jews and the Christians, but do not believe in God is made up of the Trinity. God is an all-powerful, singular being. They believe the Quran to be added to the Torah and the Gospel, though the Quran looks down upon Christians and Jews for not taking God seriously after witnessing all of God's miracles. I believe that is why the Quran focuses so much on the repetition of God's all-powerful being and the defining of your life by works. Now, I'm going to expound upon that a little bit. In the Quran, they talk about Christians and Jews as being like brothers, right? But they look at us as being like disobedient prodigal sons that had the truth, saw the Red Sea parted, had all these miracles, yet consistently fall short and start using, especially the Christians, they see the Christians as being like money makers off of the religion, and they really look down on that. They're like, you guys are just, you're crap. You've seen the truth, and you distort it, you use it to your own means, and you continue to lie and twist it and just treat God and miracles and the truth like garbage. So screw you Jews and screw you Christians. Even though you have the truth, we still kind of think of you as brothers, but more like idiots. Because if you know the truth, then what the hell are you doing? And it was very much like that. It was very condescending and like, what's wrong with you guys? You guys are dumb. You've seen the truth and you reject it. What's wrong? Basically saying, if you see the truth as a human, you should no longer sin. It's like getting rid of the human condition. There's no grace. There's no repentance. It's like, you've seen the truth. You're done. Continue on, right? So there's no grace in that. There's not a lot of redemption qualities within that, it shows like an arrogance within these people, because they're not doing that good. They're still messing up.
You put the onus, like the responsibility on yourself to then act essentially perfect, right?
Like prove yourself to God, right?
You got to prove yourself in a way, like it's all action or works based, and like I think that's the whole difference with Christianity compared to even Judaism. It's like you can't measure up to what God's standard is.
Yeah, and it gives you that love for other people when they mess up, and for yourself, so that you can continue moving forward. Otherwise, you can't.
Well, the concept of grace is so incredible to me. I think that when people have their Jesus moment, that they finally understand what that is. And so my heart breaks for the Muslims. My heart breaks for them when I think about a God who doesn't have grace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kate J, how you doing? What's so miraculous about Christianity is that we went from a tiny underground sect to one of the greatest forces of good on earth within the course of 1,000, 2,000 years.
Amen.
Absolutely, and that's because it's the truth.
Yeah.
And we can get into some of the history of how badly we got crucified.
Oh,
and,
just Nero's reign, dude.
Nero's
Talk about
reign.
coming close to death, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, when he was on the battlefield and he saw the cross. Constantine. Yeah, sorry, Constantine.
David said it was Constantine 300 years later.
Saw the cross on the battlefield, made it the Roman religion. Yeah, so
Thank you, David.
That, it was an absolute, complete annihilation, scorched earth plan for Christians. And somehow we made it through that, and that's because it's divine and it's true.
All right, so continue.
We're going to continue on here, guys. So, back to the Quran, all right, guys? they have a lot of the same stories that we share within the Bible, all the main ones.
How are they different, Joe?
Let's talk about that. The renditions of biblical stories was missing some crucial elements. In the attempt to make the stories perfect from beginning, the points of struggle and faith were extracted. Joseph knew he'd be ruling before he was in prison. Baby Jesus comes out of the womb speaking. Abraham knew he wouldn't have to kill his son. The theme of these things being settled before the struggle cancels the need for faithfulness in God.
Well said.
Don't make sense.
Read that again, dog.
The theme of things being settled before the struggle cancels the need of faithfulness in God when things don't make sense.
That's great.
I thought this was a bit of a loss. Now, when I read those stories, the idea of faith and putting that in God when there is no binary reason of rationale or logic that's fundamentally at the core of anything making sense for you to continue on a path, unless in the Quran God comes to you and tells you, don't worry, you're not going to kill your son. By the way, Joseph, you're going to get imprisoned and it's going to suck, but guess what? You're going to rule Egypt. So don't worry. And baby Jesus, he doesn't come out like every other baby, like you and I, crapping our britches. He comes out like Stewie. He's fully freaking brain this big. He's telling everybody what's going on. He's fully, and he tells people in the Quran, basically, I'm going to live a perfect life.
Yeah.
I'm not going to struggle the way you guys are. I'm going to do all these things. So, hey, deal with that.
Yeah.
And that is the idea behind Christ being a man. No, he's a God. And this is the idea of the Trinity that they don't accept, because God has to be a singular being.
But he is singular.
And this is the idea behind them and their stories having to be perfect.
Yeah.
And this guy sees everybody as making mistakes, the Jews, the Christians. So he's like, let me make these stories perfect. Let me fix these stories.
When he actually made them carnal, that's what he actually did. It's so cool to me to actually hear that, because when somebody who doesn't know about Christianity and the idea of faith, and so many of the, our nomenclature, our spiritual sacred nomenclature, which is grace, mercy, the Trinity, some of these things, these concepts are they transcend normal human understanding, right? And that's why when you read the Bible, you're kind of frustrated. You're like, isn't this supposed to be like the Quran? Perfect people doing perfect things. There's none of this struggle, none of these problems. This is like my guidebook to living a perfect life. And when I read these pages, all I see are people messing up and then falling out of grace. It's frustrating at first because you want an answer that's outside of your life that's going to prove to be the key to life in the way that perfection is. But then after reading it for a while, you start to see that is the perfection of it. Faith is the perfection of a man as he's submitting to Christ. Because how could Joseph truly submit if he wasn't tested through faith, right? Or Abraham, how could he? And so after your walk begins to grow, you start to read those stories and see the perfecting of it, because the desire is, let me see a perfect story. Let me see a man who is a God the way that I think is a God. Let me see all of these things connect perfectly and symmetrically when it's transcendent of that carnal desire.
Then you don't have a need for faith.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no need for faith.
That's the sad part about it, because
there's no need for it. And what you've done is you've put arrogance in the place of humbleness. And you've stopped the ability to learn and progress because you've stopped that novel moment from occurring from when you might not know what's going to happen. And that's okay.
That's okay.
But you're going to move forward in faith, and then you're going to watch God move, and then you're going to see how things progress and how growth occurs and how he is a living God you can put faith in. You might not know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that's why their culture is stifled and has been for a long time. But it's also why people are gravitating towards Islam, people like Tate, is because they are very.
See, I have my thoughts on Tate's the reason why he actually went, because you have to be, when I analyze Tate as a person, there's two things that come up for me. First of all, he loves attention. He was on that Big Brother show, so he knows what it's like to be in front of the camera from a young age. He knows what it's like to have attention and influence, and he likes that, dude. There's no higher currency for a person than that kind of power, and he says it over and over again in his interview. It was hilarious to me. He's like, why don't I just roll over and just have a normal life? It's like, well, dude, because you're addicted to power, and attention and all that stuff. That's why you want to keep bearing down on this path. But when I look at his attraction to the Muslim religion, and I think about what's his motivating him, since I know he didn't give Christianity a deep dive, he strawman the heck out of it. Why did he get attracted to the Muslim faith? I think it's because of what it has to offer.
He tells you. He says it's the last religion.
Well, I think those are the easy things to say that are going to build him up as a man. I'm looking at the furtive, sort of hidden things that he's keeping because they're less cool to listen to. They don't build up his character the way he knows he shouldn't share this. And so I'm picking away at those easy go-tos and say, well, what might be some other motivating factors? Because he's a smart guy, and I'm sure he knows he's strawmanning Christianity, and he doesn't want to say, like, I think he likes the idea of, and especially from all of his interviews and stuff, that the all-powerful man thing, the masculine, the sort of superficial masculinity, having several wives, those things, I think he underplays those as motivating factor for what drove him to that faith. Because if he was being honest with himself, and he said to himself, why do I like this faith? Because when he goes into the homosexual and the gay things and some of the stridently like strict parts of the Muslims, you could tell he's not subscribing to that. Like, he's not going to be, there's going to be tons of Muslim leaders out there going, no, Andrew, that's not, if you want to be a Muslim, you need to be on board with us, and that's not okay. That's not the way we handle our communities. We do not tolerate homosexuals. We kill them. That's what we do. So I think he has those underlying motivations, and I think a lot of the younger men do these days, including the fresh and fit guys, where it's like, I want to have more wives. I like the way that Muslims present the man in the marriage and in the family. I like the amount of control they have. I like the way that they're relished and sort of, worshipped. The man is worshipped more than anybody else in the family ethos.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. In the Quran, they view Eve as Adam's deceiver. They view women as inherently deceitful, and they will continue to deceive man. So they don't trust women. They believe them to be a step above Satan in a lot of ways, straight up. And therefore, they cannot be trusted under any circumstances. They cannot be trusted. They are sexually deceitful. They are going to deceive you into your life, and that is their part to play within society, is to give children and to be always watched over, like, never trusted. That's the way they look at them, and it's because of.
Well, if I'm Andrew Tate and I'm hopping on my jet and I'm going to Dubai and I'm hanging out with my, Muslim friends, and I see their interactions with their wife, and their wife is, like very super submissive. She is in that place, and he can have several wives and everything, and then he goes to the United States, and then you see the guy getting bitched out by his wife, can't do what he wants to do, getting divorced, getting totally, just gutted by, he's like, Muslim sounds better to me. I want my freedoms. I want to be able to subjugate the woman appropriately according to my beliefs, so I don't have to have any guilt and feel fine about it. I'm just assuming, it's conjecture, it's speculation based on who Andrew Tate is, the things you've said in the past, and why he would strawman Christianity.
I think he also views God as existing as a fact, but I think he views religion as there's not like a true one. So it's kind of like pick your flavor.
Right.
And the flavor of Islam looks better right now in the current culture wars because Christianity's kind of looking to apparently be bending from his perspective, which if you're not deep in the Christian community, it's probably a fair perspective.
Agreed.
Because I also heard one of his close buddies, his I can't remember his name. He's known as a sartorial shooter, and he's been giving a lot of interviews lately. And he's an Australian guy that's lived in the Middle East most of his life. I think he was like a special forces guy from Australia, and he was given he recently is trying the Muslim thing out, and he was giving his explanation on it. He kind of at first was like, "Nah, this is not what I'm about." But he kind of said every single, like, he lives in Dubai. He's like, every single high quality guy I respect that has a great family, great values is a serious Muslim. And so he started correlating that in his head, and that's why he started giving it a chance.
Okay,
so I don't know, conjecture wise what to know of these guys' true motivations, but I can see that happening. Like, I think there's a lot of Muslim families that really are high quality people. The men are not there to have 4 wives. They're truly like a family dude that's doing it right. And America looks like a clown show a bit from the outside.
100% agree, and that's where I mean, when you're being a man, and Andrew Tate's all about being a man and selling this whole manly thing, you need to critique based off of research, and that's why we talked about reading books. If you want to man up and truly be a man,
you got to care about truth of the religion. Like, that's where I think the big problem is. Even if the outcomes, even if one of them does have what looks to be a better outcome, the truth of the religion is what matters more still.
I agree.
So I think you could maybe let's say objectively Islam does have like a current better family structure outcome. That doesn't change the fact that Christianity is true and Islam isn't. So I think he's got if I had if I had advice for him, it'd be look into dig for the truth.
This
of
ties back to this also ties back to the stifling of the Muslim culture. Okay, it hasn't grown. It hasn't grown that as much as it hasn't progressed in the way of civil rights. All of the different U.S. freedoms that we have, they do not have. Okay, so they haven't encountered the same kind of problems that we have as well. They've been insulated. So if you were to take a snapshot out of the 1800s of a Christian household in the United States, I bet you it would be very similar to what these guys are admiring in the families in Dubai. Yeah, so we have to be honest with the problem, okay? And we've talked about this on our podcast so many times. The problem with culture seeping into our Christian faith has given us a decrepit, poisoned, defeated Christianity. And the only way you're going to know that is by looking at your history, because this is something that's happened in the last 40 years. But if you want to look at Christian families from the 1800s, the early 1900s, there'd be beautiful representations of something that's going to be more biblically sound.
So one point I want to bring up between civilizations. So historically speaking, you have civilizations that have prospered and continue to prosper. And what was their bedrock, right? You have the European nations, Britain, England, superpower, still is to this day. You have France, you have Germany, of course, then you have America. These are all superpowers. They were at one point in time, Italy, within their days, okay? They have something in common. I'd like to really paint a picture of according to what faith does and why it's so important. When I read the Koran and why it's stifled, and within your belief structure, what allows you to progress, what allows you to get on a boat and travel across the ocean and get scurvy and meet Indians and get shot at and almost die in Plymouth Rock and continue on. What allows you to do that? It's faith. It's faith. There's nothing else. You don't get an end to your story. You say you have to go. You feel that, and then you go, and then you encounter all kinds of dangers. You counter evil. You go to battle. After you're done battling, you might lose. You continue battling because you know in your heart what's right, but you might not know the outcome. So you use faith. And you see the Muslims stifled, what you call delayed, right? It's because their religion is not based on faith. It's based on works.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that is what stifled them. And inherently, it's not going to progress. Like even when you brought up Dubai, it's like those are Westerners that went over there that made them successful to the way. They took advantage of a better system. And it's what we do.
Not to mention the natural resources that funded it all. I mean, it's not freaking
Silicon
Valley.
Dude. It's not novel ideas.
Dude, it's not.
It's not some groundbreaking new technology. It's oil.
Let's be honest.
We should actually probably watch more of this, huh?
Let's do it.
I told Dave to jump ahead because we're on the religious topic, and it's very big on this whole podcast. Is 333 Dave. He kind of points out here how everyone is religious, and a lot of people don't even know why they believe. Let's let that play out.
His face is hilarious. He's like, awesome, we just stuck something in my butt.
I think that everyone, when we talk about, we can link back into religion and talk about atheists. I don't think there is such thing as an atheist nowadays. I think everyone has a religion. If you're not religious to God, you're religious to either this woke agenda, or you're religious to a political party, or you're religious to some kind of perversion. Everyone's religious to something. You have to decide what is you're most loyal to above everything. You have to put these things in hierarchical order. In our last talk, I said this. A lot of people hold beliefs and they don't know where they got them from or why they hold them. There's people walking around who believe things and they don't know where it came from or why they so strongly believe it. They don't even have any personal experience to link it to. You truly believe 2 + 2 is 5. Why? Oh, because it just is, and the news. No. What happened to you that made you believe? Nothing's even happened to you, and you believe this with your complete core.
Yep.
You've been psyoped. I know where my loyalties lie. I've had them in order. I know who I put above others. I absolutely not only know. And sometimes in the most harsh situations on earth, there's going to be scenarios in life which are completely and utterly, they're unexpected and they're exceptionally rare, where you have to make very difficult choices. But I know my hierarchy. I know if I was in a position, a hypothetical, where I had to choose between my brother or my girl, there wouldn't be a, oops, what do I do? I know the choice.
It's never been the case between the two of you?
It's never been the case between us yet. But if it happened, I know it would be. I've had girls say, I've had girls try and give me the line. I've had girls do it. I've had girls say, if you're going to live with your brother, then it's going to be weird.
No, it's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, has a girl ever come in between you guys since you were kids? Never.
It's impossible.
That's because of the value taught down.
Completely. It's absolutely impossible.
So the hierarchy of compliance and respect at that time, last name was first.
Yep.
Where would it be today? If you're raising kids today,
yep.
What is number one? Is it God?
It is God.
Is it me second? Then who?
No, it is God. It's God first, and then it's the last name and the legacy in my teachings. I think it has to be God first. I think it has to be God first because God is the only thing that can resist this insanity.
Yep.
What is happening is truly evil. This is not some different worldview. No, it is evil because it is dishonest. Anything that is dishonest must be evil. It is a lie. All of it is a lie. It is constructed deliberately to be a lie. It's deliberately constructed to alter the minds of people to believe in lies. It is evil. So it has to be God first because God is truth. And I believe if I have children who put God first and then put respect for the last name and the things I've taught them second, it's very hard to corrupt them. How are you going to truly corrupt these people? It's going to be very difficult. And that's what I always try and do. And that's how I was raised. I was raised in a Christian family. I was actually raised religiously. Then I thought I was smart when I became atheistic. Because, yeah, there's a lot wrong with the world. And obviously, I've already apologized for that and understand I was completely wrong. But respect for my last name, even to this day, still there. And that's why
and break you.
I say to my girlfriend, if we were walking down the
street, he's absolutely right. Is that one has sort of religion, and whether like the atheists, I think it's so common to see like socialist part of the wokest agenda there is, because everyone is clearly long for like meaning out of some sort of. Yep. If it's not going to be religion, it's going to be activism or something else to jump on. Oh, yeah. Which is, it's kind of ironic because we posted this on Kid Without God, like 100 comments to debate right now. And it's like these atheists had an idea that worldview objectively is really and then that activism stuff. They care about these morals that they have as a Christian book, but don't have a reason for them.
That's
and so,
Christian.
Yeah, exactly.
You get these types of phrases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then what was he? I read him saying, keep praying for Jesus. I think one day. But God is number one priority.
Start reading. Yeah, you need to read, bro. And he said reading the Koran, which is good.
He did.
He's been reading it. Reading it in prison. Good.
Yeah. But having like him promoting having God is like no priority right now. He's on the wrong. Still God, but in the right direction. Because I think having 100%. And I totally agree with his family name thing. I think having respect for your family name, your parents, and I think that's what part of they talk about the problem that no one cares about that anymore because they don't have families that are together.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes right into nationalism. Family name, your country,
your crest,
the world, and then humanity.
Yeah, you have all these layers of I don't want to embarrass my family. I don't want to embarrass my town, my country. Right. Like there's layers to this, and all that stuff has kind of been removed because we're just like this shameless society now that wants to tolerate everything and not judge anything. And so yeah, I think he's right with that answer. I think if you raise kids with God being number one and your family being number two, it's going to be hard to corrupt them.
Yeah, and then the pushback is the pushback you hear from the Indian countries, the Muslim countries, is there's in Indian countries when it comes time for final exams, there's more suicides than in any other time of the year, because the kids are so afraid of making their parents embarrassed or bringing shame to their family that if they don't get the grade, they just kill themselves. So there's a misalignment of values again, where the appreciation and love that the parents has for their kids is qualified by how good the kid performs, right?
Back to action-based.
And back into the United States, progress is saying, hey, you know what you have interest in, and this is where things begin to sort of degrade. It's like, if I have interest in science, but my mom wants me to become a doctor, and she doesn't support me, and I end up leaving that behind, but I have a real aptitude for science, and I could be, I'd be a begrudging dentist my whole life, instead of a really super powered scientist where my passions are being brought to bear. But I think
the gifts God gave you.
The gifts God gave you. But here's the thing, is you need both. You need to have the critical nature of the family, which is lost on the United States
at this
point.
It's a balance.
Because if you're critical of your kids these days, if you're critical of your kids' desires, okay, then you're the overbearing parent, right? Then you're stifling, you're smothering, you're doing the negative thing.
Well, that's an easy access for them to say, I'm going to be mommy, I'm going to be daddy, I'm going to control your narrative, I'm going to tell you what you should be, I'm going to tell you what's good, and just listen to me, because you're taking the leadership out of the home, and that's what they're doing, and you can see them constantly taking on this narrative of Tate does this, and then Pat does this over again. He's like, they go to the fundamentals. And we've been saying this for years since we started this podcast. They're destroying the families. Number one.
Yeah,
they're destroying the families. And they go further into clans, like we had talked about. Groups of families together that hang out, like the Mennonites, like the Amish people, these more fundamental people, these more conservative, farther right people, right? So when you're able, and then virtue, and then ethics, and then morals, right? So it's basically the groundwork, the fundamentals between what makes things truth. And he goes into this a couple times, is what makes a man is him holding on to principle more than anything else, which is truth.
Principles are like a sort of generic term for virtues, and this is where
you could say truth, because if you can manipulate, if you can take a man and you can corner him with worldly desires, he's afraid of death, he's afraid of suffering, he's afraid of pain.
Each man will have his day of reckoning,
right?
Yeah.
And he's not fortified. You're reading Juiced Morlow right now.
Yeah.
Right? The Rape of the Mind. I encourage anyone to read this book. It's the premier book on brainwashing. And he talks about the people that are the hardest to brainwash. They're like freaking Fort Knox, dude. Like, you're going at this thing with nuclear weapons and they just don't break, are fanatically religious people. You cannot break them. The most conscientious, the most logical, the rational people, they break within a couple days.
So I want to go back to family really quick, because you're talking about, this is where the Juice Merlot concept is very salient, is by how do you protect the family? This came up many times during their interviews, and Pat was asking some pretty good questions, and he was kind of illustrating how out of touch, Tate was, because he's really rich, and his problems aren't normal men's problems. Kind of the way we began this podcast is we're trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes. That's hard. I don't instinctively know what these people are dealing with. We're arrogant creatures, and our problems we tend to put on other people as their top problems, but they're not. We project that. So I was looking at what he was saying, and I felt like he was really trying to bring the conversation to a point that helped the family man, the person who's stuck in society as he was, to try and get back his family. And the insulating qualities that what we were just talking about with faith and having a father in heaven, being accountable to God, seeing everything you do, and having a real understanding of these things is what keeps people, their conscience, employed. And so take, for instance, a normal family unit. Like you can go back to our first podcast. That was like one of our first podcasts, was the assault on the family. That's really what's killing everybody, right? They're not getting the education that only a family can give. So I look back and I'm telling myself, these people in the United States have so many resources. Why aren't they using them?
Well, that's the
right?
problem. That is
So-
the problem.
so
Because
you ask
Mike said
yourself,
this in the
why aren't they
beginning,
using-
John, he said this in the beginning, and I strongly agree with this. And I was talking to my buddy who's got a beautiful family. He's got an awesome job, and he's feeling just empty. You know, this richness, this abundance, this prosperity, this richness that we have in this country has made families, you don't need one. You can raise a child on your own. You don't need a man and a woman together. You can be a single mom. You can raise your kids. You can put them through school. Hell, if you have a good job, you can put them through private school and college if you want to. Right? So it was incumbent upon people back in the 1800s, like you were saying, when you had to have a family to survive. Like it was a necessity, you know?
And you needed the clan a lot of times.
You needed a clan. You needed
Totally.
other people to have your back. Like literally, you would get taken over and killed, and your wife would get raped, and your kids would be enslaved unless you had a couple guys having your back and you had their back. And that's the way it worked back then, right? And these are those inherent truths, that morality that's now being taken over by YouTube, by Google, by the narrative.
So that's
today.
the
But
question.
it comes along with prosperity.
That's
and
right. So you
richness.
have the American family is the one that's degrading the most, right? So they have all these resources. How do you insulate and protect them? That's where Tate was falling short with what are the resources? What can you use to instantiate some kind of rigidity to reclaim programming your kids, having a set doctrine, having respect between your kids. Now, it's a very, very important balance because back in the day, there was apprentices, right? Like you didn't have the colleges that we have now. Like if your dad was a dentist, right, you would learn how to be a dentist from him. He would teach you how to do this. A lot of the specificity of the actual workflow was described by somebody personalized to you, somebody you knew very well, and that was actually able to teach these kids how to be good at that job, right? So everything has become so disassociated from the family unit that the resources, they're saying that's the greatest resource. So what I've come to understand is the resources have been confused and mislabeled. And this is where I can kind of see a psyopsy thing going on, where it's like people look at the university as the highest education you can get, right? When you would probably get a better education interning, as to the dentist himself, right?
Let's be honest.
The
Universities
family itself.
are how you meet people. It's a networking place. You go to Princeton to meet people that you can do business with, right? You go to Yale, you go to Harvard, so you can meet other people that come from rich families that you can do business with in the future. It's a networking place. It's not necessarily a place of education.
But this is why I think the mislabeling of the potential for resources is everybody's going to the dung hole to try and find the resources because it's labeled the best, when they should be going to the family. They should be going to the natural resources that we've given, so that those resources have been sort of degraded. They put them to D, B, and then now we're at C. It's like this is the problem that's happening because the resources are there. We have them all at our disposal, but they're not going to them.
Well, I think part of it, like you mentioned abundance, which is true in the culture of just our country as a whole. But I think it's also the flip side is true because
Poverty?
Not necessarily poverty, but like 60 years ago, a dude working a manual labor job could support his family.
True.
Like you
Two-car
can't do
garage.
that.
No.
You can't do that today.
Nope.
We have abundance, but it requires there's a big cost to it. Like you have to now have both parents working, which stresses the family, which
These
adds
problems
all
started
these problems.
back then.
Yeah, and they started back then, and
That's
that's
when
where
they started.
that quote psyop could be true. It's
Yeah.
like, let's get women out of the home into the workplace. We double the workforce.
Yeah.
And that, if you look around that same time, men's wages adjusted for inflation kind of went stagnant because the workforce doubled on them, and now their value is as wage is way down. So it's just like this whole
Snowball
domino
effect.
effect happened that like
Absolutely.
kind of destroy, and then it all works perfectly because now it's like, well, school is a daycare for their children.
Right.
It's
Oh,
like,
it's
now we
more
got
than a daycare. It's
indoctrination.
indoctrination.
well, yeah, because they're
Propaganda
sending them to
central.
school now. Like when they're 3, because we need to send them to government school to learn.
It's the plan, right?
Yeah, so
it's the plan, and that's why I use the Matrix over and over again. And it does seem
a great
little bit
analogy
paranoid sometimes because you can go right off the deep end with it.
Speaking of, maybe we should roll into the clip. Speaking of Matrix, they have 142.20.
Let's do it.
This is where he's kind of like everyone's
Matrix the trash in. I have a great analogy for this one. I love it.
But they were different parameters. Perhaps they were competing ideas. But I think in the modern world, it's not so much competing parameters. It's just people who believe in things and people who don't believe in anything besides what they're fucking told. It changes every day. You have the empty brains, the slave minds, and the people who actually stand up for something. And the free thinkers. But the slave minds, you can't say, well, they believe in a different ideology, because they don't. They believe in what they're told to believe in on that particular day. It changes. They don't have any true core belief. They just repeat. I talk about the Matrix all the time, and people say, why did you choose that terminology? And I chose that terminology because it is perfectly accurate in describing exactly what is happening. The Matrix is a computer program which is designed to control your mind so that your body can be used to power the machines. That's exactly what happens when they make you watch the news, to control your mind so you continue to use your body, to work some garbage job and suffer from inflation and power the machines. Machines being soulless people who are in charge of the world. But there's also a million other different ways you can compare the Matrix to the real world. In the Matrix, they say anybody can become an agent at any time. If their mind is not unplugged, they become an agent. If their mind is not freed, they turn into an agent. You can see that in real life. Mention COVID to an NPC. Mention Trump to an NPC. You can sit and have a perfectly cordial, normal conversation with somebody for an hour and be fine. And you can mention one of the particular subjects which they are programmed to hate by the Matrix itself, and they will turn into an agent in real time. And you will see them now start to genuinely, emotionally dislike you as a person. They were your friend for an hour. Yeah. Now they hate you. They will turn into an agent. COVID was perfect. I would sit with people and we'd all be friends until I mentioned that COVID's garbage. And now they're an agent. What do you mean COVID's garbage? My friend's grandma was 99 and she got sick. Okay. Sorry, it doesn't change my view, and they change. And the Matrix is actually a perfect, absolute explanation of what's happening. And Morpheus says it, if your mind's not freed, you can be one of them. And that's what's happening. And this is why we don't have competing sets of parameters which are trying to argue about which is the best way to run the world. We have people with parameters who believe in family and love and God and tradition and taking care of yourself and taking care of others. There's people with moral standard, and there's people with none. Zero. Empty vessels, agents who are programmed on any given day of what they're supposed to care about. These people can't tell me they care about things. That's what's most annoying about my position, because it's absolutely and utterly weaponized virtue they use against me. The people who hate me because, one, I truly believe, and I know this is arrogant to say, but I feel like I have to say it. There's definitely a massive jealousy implement. If I wasn't so tall and rich and good looking, they don't fucking like me. They don't like me because I remind them of the jock at school that took their girl. That's part of it.
I know. I kind of wish we should let them do that. But so it just reminds me of Brave New World.
Yeah.
Oh, just 100%. Because if you guys should read this book for real, it's written by Aldous Huxley, and it's a utopia. Everyone lives and has sex with whoever they want. They all look 29 until they're 63 or 65, and then they drop dead. And they all have these pleasure-based lives. They never have to deal with pain. They never have to deal with suffering. If they do, they have something that they confront. They hit a soma up, and they go on a soma holiday, and they go off to La La Land for God knows how long. And it's just all right. Everyone's just like, you know what? You should probably have a soma. And they're like, you know, you're right. I'm going to go do that. And then there's this Indian tribe out in America where you got John living in, the savages, right? These guys that are just like they're Indians. That's what they are. They live out in the middle of nowhere. They have none of the pleasures. They have suffering, right? And John comes back, and you get this this reality, all right? Because we're talking about like why is what? Because what he's saying is like these are agents, right? And he's talking about freedom, and he says freedom. If you don't have a freed mind, right, then you will be controlled. And we get this idea that freedom means pleasure, right? That freedom means, your life is, you get to do whatever you want. And whatever you want, essentially, is seek pleasure. It's hedonism. at its central. That's what it is, right? But then if you read Brave New World, you see that John is obsessed with suffering. He wants to earn things, right? He wants to earn love. He wants to earn, respect. He wants to suffer for these things, right? And that means boundaries. That means rules. That means not pleasures, right? That means that the pleasures aren't enough. And that's where you get this, where we're at right now, is because, like, what is freed? When I hear him say, like, if you freed I think that's one of those terms we have to define right now. Because I think a lot of people think they're free when they're slaves.
But also,
rules are not freeing.
I would ask, do the average, or maybe like say the average person, do they want to be free? And that comes back to the Matrix movie. Like, you got the guy, I can't remember the Tank, what do they call him? Tank, I think his name was. He like chose to join the Matrix and like erase my memory and then give me this great life, and I'll sell out my team. And so I think, like, all these people are kind of like plugged in and like kind of enslaved by it, but it's like, do they want anything else?
This is true.
And it's like, how do you get someone who doesn't want anything else to realize that, this is just nonsense?
Well, that's why Tate's such a good cheerleader, because he like cheers on the truth. He silver lines it. He makes it seem
it's
like
compelling.
It's
like,
compelling.
For like,
yes,
we're like guys like us. We're not going to have this giant audience and we're not like compelling speaker like this guy is.
No.
So you need like someone like him to get the people in the door.
Yeah.
To then find someone like us, because I think
because then it comes down to source material. Then it comes down to reading. Then it comes time to rigors. Like he talks about training. And he talks about being hungry. Remember that, John? Where he's like, I don't eat. I eat one meal a day. I drink 15,000 cups of coffee a day. And then I also smoke cigarettes.
Nicotine and caffeine.
Yeah, right. And he's like, that's what I do. And I like to feel irritable all day long and hungry. I hate to feel full and satiated because it destroys my ability to be competitive. And being in life is about competition. If you know anything about competition, it's very uncomfortable until you understand how great it is, and you wire your brain up to say, this is great, right? So it goes back in line with his compellingness to truth, right? You have to compel yourself to truth. Like John says, you have to animate your spiritual truth to your identity so you can be encouraged and you can be motivated to do these things. Somebody brings up like 18-year-old kids, I'm not motivated. Why aren't you motivated? You're 18 years old. You should be motivated. You don't need anything to motivate you. You're just simply 18 and a male. What the hell else do you need?
And that's like, what Rollo talks about, all the sedations today. And probably just also lack of testosterone. Like, how many of these kids that are 18 are running around with like a 200 and some testosterone level, and if you had them at like 600-700, they would actually be a completely different person
because of bad
diets. But their environment, how they grew up, eating a terrible diet and zero physical activity, and just playing video games, like the testosterone levels are all screwed up. And like what is Huberman says, testosterone makes effort feel good,
right?
And so I can see this being a problem. And that is this some psyop, as he's saying, that they ultimately want? Like, if you look at the male testosterone levels averages over the years, it's just
plummeting,
plummeting. And it's
and our ideas of beauty. He brings this up as well. It's like, here we have Victoria's Secret models that are just average looking, and we're saying that's beautiful, right? A cathedral is beautiful, and he brings up this example. I'm using Tate's examples here because. And then we have these other glass buildings that are just bricks, right? And we're saying, oh, it's made that way, right? Because if everything's just a brick, it doesn't matter. You're not compelled to think of it as special. You're not going to invest in it. You just move somewhere else. Hey, this place is a shithole. I'm going to go somewhere else, right? Beauty is something that has a purpose. Yeah. And it's also like defined specifically for that purpose, right? Like a Ferrari is awesome because it's meant to go fast. That's why it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right? A helicopter, a fighter jet is badass because it's literally made to go as fast as possible and to destroy. And that's why it's cool. Same with a cheetah. Same with a tiger, right? Same with tsunamis. Yeah. Same with black holes. Same with the sun, right? These things have purposes, and that's why they're badass, and that's why we love them, and that's why they're beautiful. Is because every purpose is rare, and that's why we constantly reflect back on, like you were saying, Johnny, God made you with a purpose, right? He made you with specific gifts. When you're bringing up the Hindus, like and the Indians, when they were like, these people are committing suicide, right? Because they're not giving credit to what they were meant to be, right? Their purpose isn't being acknowledged,
and that's an important thing to do within society. That's that flexibility and rigidity, that the duality that God has put in every electron and neutron, surrounding every atom on this planet, the day and the night, right? The good and the bad. He's done this for everything. There's a balance to be struck. It's not far left, it's not far right, it's dead center. And we waver between the two. And whenever we go one direction, we go over course correct all the way to the other, right? Yeah, so it's one of those things that where you have to see that's the way God made it. And that's why I love the deists so much. Is because the deists were like, I love the Word of God. And like I read Thomas Paine's initiative. Very cool. The dude knows the Bible better than I do, and probably better than most Christians do, but he chose to be a deist. And you have to understand where he's coming from, okay? He's coming from, Catholic Church. He's coming from Anglicans, the Anglicans, right? In Egypt, or the Anglicans, right? So church dominated and was crushing science, and it's saw it as an affront to God, right? Which is ridiculous because God created everything. So no matter if you're a scientist, you're going to end up with God. And that's the way most philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians were all very religious people before this happened, and there's a separation, materialism occurred. So when he looked at the Word of God, he's like, this is great, but science is even better because we can look at the Word of God and we can say, this is in his creation too. We can get to know his character through science, right? Because he was coming from a completely far-leaning place to where they were afraid of science, right? So that's why he went deist. You can see that within his journey. It's not because he was in a balanced place. He was in that imbalanced where we were fearful of what God had put for us. We did lack the faith to trust and say, that's going to be bad. I'm going to have to kill my son. I'm going to have to be a slave. This is impending doom. When God's like, not really. Actually, have faith in me because there's something waiting for you. There's a truth. I want you to grow. Let's do this together. But they said no. And you see that happen within history a bunch of times. And right now, the Christian church is at a point to where it's let its doors wide open. And it has no definitive purpose other than all love, all grace, all mercy. And you see this hypocrisy in which, like, you even hear Tate say this a couple times. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. It's okay. And this idea that love and forgiveness is just going to cover everything, and there's no accountability, and there's no idea that you have to do things a certain way. It's like, take steroids, and you'll be jacked like Ronnie Coleman if you're a Christian. That's the idea. It's like you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to diet. You don't have to do any of this stuff. You're going to just take the easy way out. And that's the way a lot of people view Christianity nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sucks. Definitely. Sad to see. I think the qualifying factors are what are left out of a lot of people when they try to ask themselves questions about truth. Like truth is a definable term. It's exclusive in its definition. I was having a conversation with a friend and he was kind of undevoted to one path or another. He's like, there's tons of paths that get to heaven. And it's like, and I wanted to tell him, and I didn't know how to tell it to him. So a few days later, which is normal with me, it came to me, the answer that I should have given him. And I was like, well, everybody walks the same path to heaven. They'll have a different experience on that path. There's only one road that's going to get you there. But there are thousands, infinite roads down to hell. Thousands of them. And so the defining factors of life are precise. And you hear that's the overarching terms between Andrew Tate's need to give a purpose-driven life is precision within your definition of terms, and that kind of work within the philosophical terms, like you talk about virtues, right? So within truth, you have goodness, you have honesty, you have forthrightedness, you have patience, long-suffering, you have grace, you have mercy. You have all these terms, and if you only have like a superficial understanding of them, you'll never be able to employ them. And so that's the work that the family does when a child sees his parents fighting and they reconcile before him. And they start to get an understanding of what mercy is, what patience looks like, what these things actually look like. And the kids who didn't have families, they could get that through reading books, right? They could see the characters through beautiful writing. You can learn the same lessons. Now, nowadays, the fight is to try and keep this sacred nomenclature for ourselves and define it for the next generation so they can keep it sacred. Because in the world, if you take a term and you dismantle it and you destroy it, along with the destruction of that term is the ideas that term supported. And so that's where you get the male-female debacle. All of this chaos starts to happen because nobody can define terms. And so when I see him talk about God, like, what is God? God is going to be the supernatural power that organizes and gives you purpose in your life if you pursue him, right?
I don't think he has a definition of God.
Well, I mean,
in principle enough to stand up against odds that are against you.
Right? You should, right? That'd be the point,
if
right?
God exists.
Yeah, you should be able to undergo troubles and you're going to go through trials, right? You're going to be tested by the fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you find your manhood. And so my encouragement to the young guys who find Tate compelling, because he's very compelling. You listen to him, he's very good at connecting dots, and he's very, very good at creating these little vignettes and stories. And it's very much the motivation that I see that the young people gravitate towards is I've been wronged, right? So he creates a narrative where it's like, here's how you're being oppressed. This is the oppressive agenda. Like, you need to get your sword out. You need to start fighting for the sake of who you are. Otherwise, somebody's going to turn you into like the
point
Matrix,
me to battle,
right?
please.
Right. So he creates this sense of urgency within the person to say you're actually being slowly taken over by an agenda, people, powerful people, politics, whatever, the Illuminati for just a short term. And that's the motivating force, right? Now, Christ gives us a completely different paradigm for motivation, right? His paradigm for motivation is to say, not through violence, not through anything but serving the people that are nearest to you, right? It doesn't seem like a superpower. It doesn't seem like a crazy weapon, but it's actually the weapon that works best. So I want to warn and encourage the listeners, like, if you're at that point in growth where you're entertained and you're compelled by people like Andrew Tate's, understand this. There are men and women that have been fighting this battle for years. For years and years and years. They've written books. They're not as interesting to probably listen to, but they have a breakdown of what he's actually describing that's more than just look at the oppression that's on you.
Like the boy crisis.
Like the boy crisis. I was going to actually bring that up, and I'll try and look up the name. That's
Warren
a book.
Farrell.
Warren Farrell, thank you. These are guys that have actually dug deep into these issues. And yeah, thanks, dude. He always knows the names. And these guys have put in the real sweat equity necessary to start yielding you the tools to implement in your own life and to talk and connect with people. Because ultimately, people do want prescriptions. They want a definable lay of the land. And this is what manhood is. He talks about his G school of G's, to be a G, top G. If you really want to be a top G from the faith, right, from the fold, be a brother of the fold, what you have to do is educate yourself on the deficits of the people that are nearest you, right? We talk about this, putting yourself in the shoes of the man that's next to you so you can better serve him. Thomas Aquinas, right? Desire the good of the other. That's going to require you doing some research on your present circumstances, and it's not going to be from the sort of tabloid dopamine hit you get from Andrew Tate, all right? Andrew Tate spits some knowledge. Like, I learned from him. What I learned from him is how to encourage yourself. Like, there's a huge dose of narcissism and psychopathicness and sort of manicness to his way of communicating that you can actually squeeze the lime and get some good, if you are having a hard day and you need to, you don't have a dad who said your last name is Smith.
Well, you have to understand he
sees
himself as battling against.
Well,
Matrix, everything is against him.
I get
he's
that.
Constantly orienting himself, like Alex Jones. Like, is very similar. Like, his narrative is constantly playing in his brain. Like, he's constantly hyping himself up for battle. He's constantly, everything is, it's a bit of paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
What along that comes with paranoia is someone's out to get me. Why are they out to get me? Right? It's like you're assessing and you're constantly calculating everyone's actions, everyone's motives, right? And that will turn you into a bit of your own cheerleader because you're forced to. Right, you're forced to say, this is of value. I'm going to spend all my time doing this, so therefore there must. And he's very good at getting soldiers ready to go. And he talks about it. He's like, the guys that are going to go into battle are the 11 and 12-year-olds right now. These are the people that are going to go and fight and die. That's the way it's done, right? So, like, I love him for that. I think that's important. Like, a lot of guys need to be, and that's what's so important about having fellowship and having a group of guys you can sit down and talk to about your thoughts.
I like that he promotes that a lot too.
Yeah.
On like, you got to have your brothers. And they like, he even talks about how to vet them. Like, these guys shouldn't be taking girls from each other and like having just crazy,
sharing
like,
girls.
Have some respect.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Standards, as he
I was
likes
thinking.
to say.
I was thinking. Number one, I was gonna ask the audience, leave any comments. I'm kind of curious if you guys watched this interview. If you have any thoughts, any questions.
What is Darren Guerrero? What is woke? Are we woke? Who's woke here?
But yeah, so let us know there, and then you guys, the short video. Like I have another clip on the consistency of a single man versus family man. I was wondering if you got your guys' clips, if you have one that we should like
I don't remember.
hit.
By the way, Tate, Aloysia is amazing, and Dostoevsky is probably my favorite author ever.
Yeah.
So 100%. If you haven't read Brothers Karamazov, guys, and you want to read a book that's exciting, but also filled with truth, tear that sucker open. You will not be displeased. Aloysia is the shit. The Grand Inquisitor is especially amazing from that book.
Yes.
Yeah. Ivan. You get a staunch atheist. I'll have to check through them. I
No
don't
straw
actually
manning.
remember. Because some good
Great
points.
comment.
Yeah. Read Dostoevsky.
Yeah, great
for
comment.
sure. So yeah, I think that the Tate example of like why he's come to fame, his attraction, taking the Muslim route after coming out of prison. There's so much
He
there.
was doing that before prison.
Well, getting serious about it in prison. I mean, like, I heard about it after prison, although I don't keep up with Tate. So maybe that transition was already in the works. But there's so much to be learned from characters like Tate, who say what's on their mind, and learning how to say what's on your mind is a talent in and of itself.
And also knowing that like the Bugattis and the mansions and the girls eventually come right back down to fundamentals.
Yeah,
such as
I love
God.
seeing that progress.
Yeah,
Like
it's like
he
he
wasn't the guy who was just stuck with the hot girls and the Ferraris and stuff. Like he's honest enough to say that's not enough. I can already buy everything, so there must be something more.
Yeah,
I like that he said he said in the past, like a smarter thing would be if, like, have one girl, not a bunch of them, because it just distracts you, and you're like, he's like, I would be way further in my progress of like career and like stuff.
It was a bit of what did you call it?
It's a distraction,
sedation.
And then I guess we could, Dave, you want to pull 5921? That's like a 10-second clip that I thought was good from Patrick, which is on this note, because I think it was.
Patrick's also got a ton of cash and is very family oriented.
5921. I loved that he said too, like, he wishes he would start having kids earlier.
Yeah,
because that's a message I would like to get promoted. Like, why are people thinking, oh, I'm 37, it's time to have kids now?
Yeah,
and that's not working. Yep.
Like, I've been in sales for quite a while. If a guy who doesn't have any responsibilities and he's single, he has a $30,000 a month, boom, he's going to Vegas, having a good time, and then he doesn't work as hard until he runs out of his 30,000. 3 months later, I got to go make the 30,000 again. Oh my God, panic! I got to pay my bills. I'm behind on the phone. Let me buy this watch and make 40 grand. I'm going out again. So it's very inconsistent, right? And then as you're in sales longer, you're like, okay, the profile of somebody that's going to be more consistent is not a single guy. It's a guy that's married, kids, homeowner, and all those three are signs of what? Married, commitment. Homeowner, commitment, responsibility. Kids, commitment, responsibility. Last time we didn't talk about your kids. At this point, I think it's public video, your daughter running to me, give daddy a kiss, all this stuff. Everybody knows at this point. When you're in jail, sometimes I got books on my desk.
It's like insightful, intuitive.
Yeah, you do it a little sketchy. First off, Darian, thanks for the chat, bro.
Yeah, bro.
Darian,
You're
the man, bro.
Yeah.
But like him, like they can get a man. That's true. I mean, that's base of look at this type of information. Because if you're a single man, kind of out there, like you don't really have responsibilities. That's like, me and you are case, and it's I can do it when I want. I can spend my money how I want, when I want, and like responsibilities the family man has aren't there. I think I'm pretty. It's like shown in data, like when a man gets married and has kids, like you see his income skyrocket. You see things that like his brain is on to do, whereas like when you're a single dude, like the mind's of Tate, like, oh, I'm just having to get plenty of money now. I don't need to go make more kids to pay for or set up a future for. So you're feeling complacent. Really?
Yeah, it's a marshmallow experiment. So like they'd take kids and they would give them 2 marshmallows. And they put these marshmallows and they'd tell them, hey, you can have 1 marshmallow, but you only want. But if you can wait until for both marshmallows, and most people go for the marshmallow. Immediate gratification. They have trouble with delayed gratification, right? But when you have a family, when you have commitments, you have to delay gratification. This goes back into discipline. This goes back into any way you're going to get success. Those same principles, those same virtues, those same rules apply to any one of those reaching of those goals.
Yeah, and I want to point out that Andrew Tate, and this is at least what I've heard, maybe Mike can tell me more about it, but he began, like if you're a man of virtues to begin with, say for instance you're a Christian man and you have this desire to become wealthy, because that was Andrew Tate's presentation. He said if you want to protect your family, make a lot of money. Because if you make a lot of money, which to me was kind of like sabotaged itself, because okay, then your family's living in like a glass castle, and then what are they going to do when they have to interface with the world? You're their you're kind of not you're guarding them too much.
To
some way. To some extent, yeah. You don't want your kids living in like overt poverty, but you want them to be able to. No, but you want. But okay,
but you can homeschool them.
There's tons of different options there. You don't have to be a man of like incredible wealth to be able to have a family that's healthy. So my point was, you're comparing yourself to somebody like Andrew Tate, right? Andrew Tate, if I'm correct on this, started off with basically internet prostitution, like OnlyFans, gambling stuff. He moved to Romania specifically because it allowed him to do this kind of business. So he didn't climb the virtuous ladder. He climbed the ladder that pandered to people's baser desires. And is that impacting your community? So you have to ask yourself, how are you procuring these means? Because I feel like
qualify.
You have to qualify as the man at the end of the day. Is by what means did he make his income? By what means did he what kind of man is he? What kind of decisions did he make to get to the top? And what is the top at the end of the day? So if you're a man who's 18 and you want to be able to level up, skip that. As a Christian man, you don't need to have incredible wealth to be able to protect your family. You don't. You need to pour into your family the same way Christ poured into the church. You need to do the hard work that's involved with being a father, being a breadwinner, being all those things. But it's not that same sort of easy ticket, easy out to saying I have a bunch of wealth and here's my key to the lock. So I just wanted to say that because it's easy to look up at these figures and be like, well, they have all this money and that must be the way. So it's easy to get to the top if you're going to be cutting throats. You shouldn't do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the same time, I think you don't need to be a millionaire, but I think it's very beneficial for your family to be making decent money today. You can insulate a lot of the problems by not living in certain neighborhoods.
Remedy is a better thing than insulate.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to insulate your family. What you want to do is make them strong. You want to make them tough. You want to make them aware. You want to make them conscientious.
But I think like especially with children, I think they shouldn't be exposed to some of these ideas today as a child. Like I don't think allowing them to go learn about a lot of this crazy woke stuff.
Yeah, like showing your kid internet porn just because it's there is like not a good idea. So, you're not going to drink beers with your 8-year-old.
If you got to send your kid like to a public school today and deal with this nonsense and have to deprogram them every day, like are you doing what's best for your kid in that sense, or should you like take a step back, figure out how to make some more money so you can homeschool them and have your wife stay home, or go to private school? Like I think those are real things you got to
But
weigh.
the money is a means to an end there. That's not just like throw money at it. You know, because
you
you can get private schools, and that's what Pat was saying, that are absolute trash.
Well, right.
So you have to.
That's why I brought up homeschooling. But the debating is essential. And you're going to have to see your kids, and you're going to have to let them go into the world, have them come back with their, quote, truth, or whatever they've extracted and been indoctrinated with, and that they believe especially from that, like, 14 to, like, 25 range. Like, those 10 years, it's just idealistic, absolutely empowered, like, moldability.
It's woke culture, baby.
It's always been that way. The debating that I went through growing up, I would come home from school. My mom and dad would be like, I'd come home with something I was excited about, and they would dismantle that shit. And I would have to debate against them. And I would have to say, well, why is that true? Why is this something that part of it, I don't think will ever go away. And if you're working 18 hours a day, just bringing in money, how are you going to be able to have that interfacing with your children? And that's essential. Because like Tate's saying, oh, it's my name. I want them to be just like me. If I'm the guy who's going to sacrifice my time, my life for these kids, I want them to be like me, right?
It's kind of like the Muslim God versus
how are you
going
to
to
do that
God?
with just money, working 18
the
hours
Muslim
a day?
God,
you have to interface with them. You have to debate with them. You have to actually like invest in that sort of battle that's going to go on between you.
Like
and
the
your child.
Holy Spirit dwells within you, right? So if you're going to dwell with your kids, you have to dwell with them. You have to spend time with them. There's no amount of money that's going to be you can't fake that. You can't buy that out. It is what it is. It's time with your family. That's why there's so much to be said for your time. Like your time is your life. Your time is who you are.
It's like Mike said, kids are going into daycare
there's
at
no
3
way-
years old,
there's-
and they're working all these jobs, and they don't have time with their kids.
Well, but that's also a symptom of the man likely not being able to provide enough. So the wife has to work. They're both working 50 hours a week, you know, with commute times, and then
Well, I know
consumeristic mentality. They have to buy the new car. They have to have the new junk. They have to have the new iPhone. They have to have this. They have to have the new. It's because they are not focused on what is of value, which is their kids and their family, and it doesn't matter what iPhone they
have to be willing to take a sacrifice. It's like our kids are in these younger years. Likely, the wife would probably have to stay home to homeschool them. Like, what are we willing to sacrifice to live that lifestyle that's more productive for our kids?
Yeah.
Right,
like
and
we're
being
going to go
highly
from
because you can't
creatures,
lie.
We all want to fit in with the crowd. We all want to have that acknowledging, because that's all the virtue signaling that's going on. It's the nodding of the heads of the people around you. It's the likes on Facebook, and it's the hearts on Instagram. And that's what's telling people what's good and who's getting the attention and what's right from wrong. And these people have no idea what that is. And that's why people are going, wait, we need something that's fundamental, that's at your core. And that's why people love listening to Tate, because it's like, I know, with undefactable doubt, there's not a single inch of me I would never. And you hear these like absolutisms come out of him where he's like 100% gung-ho.
People
on what
want
he believes.
that. Yeah,
they're
people
striving
want
for that. They're lost for it because they're sick and tired of being the guy looking over and looking for the heading nods and the likes on Facebook and the thumbs up.
The
and
thing
the hearts
is,
and all that
Tate already
garbage.
did that. Tate already played Keeping Up with the Joneses and won. You know, he climbed the ladder of sort of debauchery, like pandering to the needs. He already did that.
Yeah.
So there's tons of families that I know that have made the sacrifices. They drive older cars. They don't, they don't get all the overtime they could because they're spending time with their kids. And that is the top G, right? Mm-hmm. That is the legacy. That's how you reclaim America. You want to know how to insulate your family? It's by spending quality time with your family, reading the Word of God with your kids, taking time with their questions, connecting with them as a father would. Like the Holy Spirit's so merciful and graceful with us. He's there constantly as we're making mistakes and learning. And he's always there to try and help us, if we call upon him, to make those hard decisions. He's a resource that's always there. Mm-hmm. And if we can be that for our kids and be that for our brothers and sisters, the people that God has put into your life are your top priority. Right. The people that God has presented to you, your family, your friends, they're your top priority. It's a very simple. You don't need the analytics of like a therapist to be able to put together what your top priorities are. The problem is they're not that exciting. They're not that compelling. It's not the dopamine dump you're going to get from a new car. You can't talk about it with your friends because it's not the popular stuff. But that's exactly the way Jesus won the fight.
But you brought up a good point, friends.
Because
it's like, I think I was talking to my buddy about this, and he is in a high position in his job, right? He's a chief, right? So essentially, like, and he's very unfulfilled because he can't share him. Like, I use this analogy. It's like when you're a commander, you can't go with your soldiers after a battle and clink your horns together and get wasted and talk about the battlefield and who you killed and who you're going to sleep with that night. You can't do that. You go right back alone to your hut or whatever, and you start thinking about the next day.
That's right.
And that's what you do. You don't get that cathartic expression of like, I'm just going to let this thing out right now. And if you don't have people you can do that with, like the commander does. He has a mentor that he talks to. And he does that, but he's a commander. So he's not a soldier. So he can't go be like a soldier. Mm-hmm. And men have to orient themselves this way. And you have to realize and remember who you are in this world. You are not another soldier. You are not somebody who's going to go over there and clink your glass with just anybody of these guys on the social media world or half the people in this world and expect to be acknowledged and get that cathartic, attaboy from them. And this is my plight. And get that dopamine rush. You're above that. You're a commander. You're a higher calling, which means you don't get to play those same games, and that can be very lonely. Well, and I can feel like you're not a part of the world, and like John was saying, it doesn't give you that dopamine kick, and you can get lost that way.
Well, I think part of what I was thinking about too with like pushing men to like you got to provide more for your family is like I look into some of my own family members, like especially these younger guys, they're mid to late 20s, and they're content making like basically no money. And it's like if you're married 3 years from now or something, dude, you can't you have no career, you're not striving towards anything. You're content because you can afford your apartment, your car payment, and your video games you're playing, and you're content. You don't feel like you need to pursue things more. And I think there's a lot of men in that circumstance. It's like, dude, if you get married like within 5 years, you haven't put any effort into a career that can support a family in any sort of way, so then you're going to completely be reliant on needing her to work as well, and never be in the situation of like not wanting to have your kid at the public school, like they're going to be in the daycare situation.
Because they're shells of men. They don't know how. They thinking they're happy right now, and that's enough. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how to progress. And sacrifice and pain and suffering is how you progress as a man. You have to push yourself to places you've never been.
For the right reasons.
You have to be happy to do that.
Standards of excellence can be taught as a young kid. You can look up, there's tons of resources for that. You can read books about Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. There are tons of these guys who've done it. But the standards of excellence are not going to be what you think. So that's where the humility and surrender are what people don't like to encounter in their lives, because it's going to make you feel like less than before you're more than. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to sacrifice, and you're going to have standards of excellence that try you on a regular basis. So you're going to have to be tried by these things every single week. You have to implement and ask for it and seek it out. It's the same way with pride. Like Christians will always have this idea of pride that's like you're going to know it when it's there. Pride's always growing in you. Yeah. Some way you're going to have to see, and the better you get it close to God, you're going to be able to seek it out and actually find these little hiding places. But that's what excellence is. It's having an understanding that you have to go seek these things out. You have to go find them. Otherwise, you will be complacent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the complacency is like, it's like a slow bleed. There's suicide.
It's a total slow bleed.
There's a bullet. There's a bullet to the brain, which is like, man, paint the walls. And then there's slow bleeds, and there's still suicides. You're still letting pieces of yourself die because you're not desiring excellence in your life. That's why when you read the Bible stories, you're going to see where men, they make bad decisions, right? They, like Jonah, and he knows what's right, and he's still he's just tied to this arrogance and pride. Only in humility will you be able to find out what excellence truly is, because you can have this sort of cliche of excellence and be pursuing that, but it won't fulfill you. And this is why Andrew Tate's journey is so interesting, right? He has the cliche of the Ferraris and the hot chicks. He does that, not enough. Right now he's trying to go to religion to see if that's enough, and he's going to go on this search. And what I can commend him on is that he's at least trying to not be complacent, to at least strive for excellence and say, what's doing the best job right now? Because you have to qualify all of these things with a rational procedure. You have to have a rational procedure to saying what's right and what's not.
And you have to be willing to make the sacrifice to go along with some of those solutions. Like, hey, JR, I'm planning on homeschooling my kids. That's awesome, bro. And like, that's not an easy choice to make, because that's a really hard thing to do. We have a very good friend. His name is Wade, and he's got 2 girls. And I remember when COVID hit, all this indoctrination started occurring, and his daughter started coming home from school, and he would interrogate them, and he would get these answers back from them, and he's like, this is not going to work. So within a few months, he had them at home homeschooling them. Like, that's what he did. He made that choice. He was like, and he was on it. You know, he didn't wait. Well, maybe next year. Well, maybe this. Well, maybe when this ends, right? And Tate brings this up too. It's like, you have to have initiative, and when you see something go down, you have to act on it. You don't get to just vacillate in thought for years, and you know, you have to act on that. When it's put on your heart, do something about it. And he did that. And I had another friend who they tried to make her get the vaccine. She was a nurse. She quit her job. She lost all of her income. She said, I'm not standing for this. It was a sacrifice. Both these people are making sacrifices for a greater good. You have to be able to take on that risk and know it's worth it if you want those changes to occur. If you want to reap the benefits, if you want to sow the ground, if you want to bear fruit, you have to open up the ground. You have to bend your ass over. You have to dig in it. You have to get dirt under your fingernails and get a sunburn on your back in order to put those seeds in. And then you have to water them, and then you can reap the fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it's always been. But today, there's always this easy way out. There's always like, oh, well, you can do both. Well, you can't. You can't do the splits your whole life and stand on 2 feet. Eventually, your balls are going to hit the ground, and you're not going to be standing anymore. And that's not a good place to move. You cannot move that way. You are stuck. Your legs are gone.
Which goes back to the issue with the church in the West. We're doing the splits, man. And I feel like if you're going to change and impact the church, everybody's like, what's the remedy? What's the prescription? The prescription is reading the gospel to your kids, being a good leader to your wife, making the sacrifices you need to, and getting on your face and on your knees and praying to God every day and up in the ante on your devotion to Christ and what you're showing through your time. Because if you're giving God an hour a day and you're being indoctrinated by culture for the rest of your day, that's a losing battle to begin with. So you need to be praying, just like Paul says, bring every thought into submission, doing you have to be a part of this renewal of the mind
being
process.
Your own best cheerleader, man.
Otherwise, you're going to be a complacent person, and you can't use the examples that are around you. Unfortunately, nowadays in this church, if you use the examples in your immediate church, and this is just a general statement here, so you might be in a great church where there are great examples all around you, but they should be challenging you, and if you have a problem in your life and you think about somebody you want to call to talk about your problem, your mind's going to tell you to call the people that will be sort of an echo chamber to your side of the problems. You need to call the people that you don't want to call, the people that you know will be a surrogate conscience to you, and you need to read literature that you don't want to read as well. You need to have that as a uniform part of your mind as a go-to, to have the challenging to yourself. Because when you look at Paul admonishing Peter, that was not a pretty situation. You have Peter here who's very reluctant to let the Gentiles in and let go of some of this Jewish tradition and let the gospel take hold. And here's Paul, this upstart, coming in and correcting him, And this is the kind of challenging that has to go on in the church if you want to grow. You have to pursue it. When the church is powerful, people are interacting and there's sparks flying all the time. You don't have to go seeking it out as much. But now in this church, you do. You have to go seeking it out. You have to start to understand what confrontation in the church looks like in a positive way. Yeah. You need to start knowing what it's like to hang out with your brothers and have communication that's challenging you and not just being this enjoyable, the compelling part is not what you should be using to qualify good interaction, good fellowship. As you grow older and you mature, you'll understand the compelling part is usually something that puts you on edge. It's not something that makes you feel great. And that's why Andrew Tate, with the sort of Illuminati subjugation of the world and everything's trying to come at you and destroy you. And it's true. This is a fallen world.
Alex
Satan,
Jones.
Absolutely. There's complete truth to that, and our gospel ramifies that. So in the West, our desire as the Iron Disciples is to wake up men, to pursue that challenge in their relationships, and to be aware of that every day, because it's an iterative process by degrees.
The bond of brotherhood is your greatest weapon. It's your greatest weapon you're ever going to have.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing that you have. That iron sharpening iron is the greatest weapon you're going to have. And that's why my brother has been with me my whole life. I would never imagine living far away from this person. ever in my life. I need to have him at an arm's length where I can just talk to him and be like, I need you here.
Yeah, God made his
that's
twins
the way
for a
family
reason.
is supposed to be. And that's the most valued possession in my life is my relationship with my brother.
Well, it
It's
makes you
far beyond
uncomfortable.
anything.
You have to understand that, like, when you're being transparent with somebody and you're putting your trust in somebody, they will violate it. That's not an
100%.
excuse to exit the church. It's not an excuse to exit the relationship. That's one rung on the ladder that you need to climb over. And so the church is very weak because of the lack of connection within it. In the West, this is why, I mean, Christianity has hard edges, bro.
Which is interesting. Tate brought up all the emails and the mails he got from Muslim brothers while he was in prison. Meanwhile, his brother, Tristan, got like nothing from Christians. And it's
Dude, I mean, the obvious point is Tate's way famous and not his brother isn't. So, I mean, like, no one's going to care that Tristan's in jail versus Tate. Everybody's going to care a lot more about Tate. I don't think that's a fair when I heard him make that comparison, I was like, that's not
Tristan
fair.
tweeted that, like, I remember probably like 4 months ago.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not fair. You know, I mean, if they were both Tates, then I'd be like, okay, fair comparison.
Well, Tristan's pretty massive following.
Nowhere near Tate.
But I don't think he's taking on Christianity the same way that his brother's taking on Islam.
But he's not a controversial figure the way Tate is.
Yeah, and I think like Tate was voicing his new Islam views pretty loudly, whereas Tristan's pretty quiet about his Christian views.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that fault folds into who Tristan is.
Yeah,
you know, so I mean, but you know, the idea of Christianity in the West and how to fix it is really our job here and now. That's every generation's job, and if you want to pick up the slack,
always be something to fix.
There will always be something to fix, and I want to encourage this is where history is so cool to me. You know, when Peter was crucified upside down, there was actually an obelisk that was being raised to show Nero was raising it, so he could probably see it while he was being crucified upside down, of all the Christians that were massacred before him. And to put yourself in Peter's shoes at that point and be like, you know, I saw all these things that Jesus did. I saw the miracles. I know it's true. But if there was ever a point when Christianity was nearest its death, that would have probably been it. You know, would have probably been it. And nowadays, it's different. We don't see people being lit on fire in the streets. The battle is being fought because people aren't seeing all of the gore. They're not seeing all of it.
Brave New World.
But it's way worse in a lot of ways because no one can see it. The senses towards the battle.
It's Brave New World.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's the enemy is the lack of something.
But I just want you to wake up to the fact that
but
just because you aren't seeing people lit on fire, you're seeing the beheadings and all the things that Nero was doing to kill the Christians, doesn't mean that our battle's it's even more intense because you don't see all that stuff. It's even more intense because you have to wake yourself up to it. If you were a Christian and see how your brother's getting burned and beheaded, that would, man, talk about feelings right there, man.
It's like a battle of complacency.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you need to wake yourself up.
And pleasure, just absolutely insulation. Pleasured insulation. Right, because you brought that point of like richness, and we're not very rich, but we do have like these access to more simple pleasures, just on with the phone. You can have like a basic garbage income and get on TikTok and be totally vacillated the whole rest of your existence, right? So it's cheap.
Yep.
So I guess that's a point to bring up as well. And one thing I wanted to say about Christians is our purpose and the prosperity gospel of the West has been completely twisted because we should be doing is making the world a better place.
Absolutely.
And that is the prosperity that that is the prosperity that we bring to the world. And that comes along with sacrifice. It's not just prosperity for me and my family. It's what can I produce that affects the world in a prosperous manner.
That's
loving
right.
your
Love
neighbor
your neighbor
as yourself, the second commandment Jesus gave.
Yeah, and
Dave,
tomorrow we're going to have a great guest that's going to expound further on the incarnation of Christ and what that means, and most importantly, a really cool topic we're going to discuss is scapegoating in the United States and the psychology of how that works its way into our faith and how that yields complacency. And so David Gornowski, he's going to be on tomorrow. I don't know when the podcast is going to be released, but it touches on a lot of this subject matter here. He's going to go a lot deeper than sort of the surface stuff we've been talking about.
We're doing it live.
Are we?
On YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so tune in tomorrow. Yeah. So then tune in tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We're going to have it.
Eastern time.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and give us a like and share and
subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
We always think of that when everyone's already left.
Yeah, guys.
Bye, guys. the absolute death of humility, dearth of humility and delayed gratification nowadays.
Yeah, I'd like to say
absolutely.
The 100%. Bible teaches us. Yeah, and I want to. This is something that blew my mind because the culture nowadays will give us offerings that are like wolves in sheep's clothing, right? So they look like something that is positive, but underneath it's a wolf. And one of those things is pride. So pride is a self-worship, right? We see a lot of that in Andrew Tate. Like he wants to use the Muslim faith to get him where he wants to be what he, When you look at where boldness, which is the biblical representation of what the world now calls pride, it comes from humility. So when you're humble, God can inhabit your temple, and then you can speak truth boldly. If you're prideful, you're always going to be coming from your own knowledge, which is always going to be a dearth. It's going to be a lacking. It's going to be a deficit. It's not going to connect. And so the world wants to keep you prideful. If you are living in a humble life, you're going to be bold, period. When it happens, you're going to have the ability and discernment that is supernatural that allow you to act just like Paul in Acts, 17, where he has his... he talks to the Jews, and he lets the Holy Spirit take over, and the demonstration of the Holy Spirit changes men's hearts. That's the difference between boldness and pride. So the world will constantly be giving you these offerings that look on the surface like, okay, yeah, you need some pride in your life. You need to have some self-esteem. You need to feel good about yourself. Blah, 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 blah. What that really is self-worship. But there's a biblical representation of that that's exactly what it should be, and that's found in humility. And that gives boldness.
At the end of the day, God made you. He gave you the gifts you have. C.S. Lewis wrote about this great in the Screw Tape Letters, about what's humbleness, what's pride. Wormwood's trying to explain to, what's his name? The other guy? Wormwood and...
Oh, the head one. I don't know.
Anyways... God gave you all your gifts, and there's a difference between being humble and being not giving credit to what God gave you and did for you. Because when someone's complimenting you, he's complimenting God's creation. And that's why we say give glory to God, right? Like he's the one who did this. He gave me these gifts. I'm just being a faithful steward. So you have to understand what your strengths are and that they've been given to you. And there's a difference between honoring that and being a faithful steward and being conscientious of what your gifts are and honoring God through them and being very knowledgeable about what your gifts are and honoring them and being sure of them. That's not pride.
Yeah, humility is kind of, the older I get, the more I see it as being able to prioritize truth. Because truth is always going to have, it's true that kids should be listened to. It's true that, people need to be heard, right? But the problem is that when you have pride is there's no prioritization of truth and what's the most important subject to deal with at that time. And so you end up with pure chaos. You end up with the woke culture where everything is vying for that limelight of here's the biggest issue we have. When you're humble, you're like, okay, somebody needs to eat. I've already ate, so I'm going to give him my food. I don't have to listen to this guy over here who wants to buy a different shirt. Like, he has a shirt. This guy's hungry. This takes priority.
Or better yet, you have something to say when there's a conversation going around you, and everyone's going, oh, yeah, this other guy's right, or whatever, and you know what you should say, and you feel like, oh, I'm just going to be humble and not say anything.
That's not humility.
That's not humility.
That's weakness.
No.
Yeah, that's
pride
actually
isn't going and saying what's true either, and saying it with confidence and saying because you believe it, and looking people dead in the eye and saying, yeah, this is what I believe. Take it or leave it. Still love you. That's not pride. And I think a lot of Christians get that conflated.
Yeah.
Same with the prosperity gospel.
Yeah. And I just want to...
Shy too, great episode today. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. And thank you, Darian Gario, bro. Thank you so much, man, for your support. We really appreciate that deeply. We need it, and we won't forget you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
And thanks for everybody tuning in.
Yeah. We'll catch you guys tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
We got another great guest coming on, and then we got next couple weeks some sweet guests lined up. So
I'm so excited, man.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a great time, guys. So
hit the like button and subscribe.
Yeah. See you guys.
End it.